Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Soul Goals. My name is Dawn. I am so stoked to have this awesome guest with me today, hailing all the way from Texas, the Longhorn State, which I can't, is that right? Longhorn like that?
Well,
The
I mean,
state?
now in your family, it's got to be the same. It's here. It's the Horn Frog State.
It's the Horn
We're
Frogs,
the
right?
Horn Frog State. We're the Horn Frog State.
Yes, you're from TCU. Yeah, we're getting ready to send our youngest there next year. I'm super pumped about that. So, yeah, go Frogs. All right.
There we
But
go.
hailing from Texas, we have Jake Thompson, and Jake is the founder of the Compete Everyday brand. And I want to just say a little personal tidbit about this Compete Everyday brand. I found it randomly online, I don't know, probably 8 or 9 years ago. And I was immediately attracted to the merchandise that you were putting out because it had that big old compete every day. And it was so meaningful for me where I was personally in my life to think, okay, I one day at a time. I'm going to take one moment at a time, one day at a time, all the things that happen to fall into line with that mentality. I loved what it spoke about. And as the last 8 or 9 years have gone on, I've been able to watch your growth into you're an author, you're a keynote speaker, you're a business coach basically as well. You help advise leaders and corporations on how to get the most potential out of their workforce and out of themselves. I think that's the bigger takeaway that we have here. You also have a great podcast too. I want to pump that one, Compete Every Day. Look that one up. And those two books, Compete Every Day, you wrote, that was your first one that you wrote,
First one
correct?
was Compete Every Day came out in 2020, and then Lead Better Now came out January of this year.
It's exciting. Both of them are different but similar in their own right, fall within that brand of Compete Every Day. And again, just go back to that whole premise of what that means. It's basically you're telling people compete with yourselves every day. Compete to be the best version of yourself every day. And you're helping guide people in what that means for them and helping them find out how to pull themselves into that place, if you will. Manageable steps. I love what you say about starting those small changes and consistency being a really big deal. And that you have to kind of make a choice to stay with it. And how can you make those choices? How can you be active in that role? So, without further ado, former Horned Frog, Jake
I'm a Horn
Thompson.
Frog for life. I'm a Horn Frog for life. Horn Frog for life.
Let's
Gotta
go.
stick that one.
Let's go. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes, I'm so pumped that you're able to do this. I know you're extremely busy, but I really feel that the information that you can give to our listeners is so vital, so valuable in a day and an age where people are so motivated to do things to be a better person, to be a bigger person, to be a better version of themselves, that sometimes they get to that edge and then they just stop because either it gets hard or it gets discouraging or you run into another wall. So I'm excited to have you here and talk a little bit about your why and how it is that you got to that because you hit walls along your way. And that's ultimately how you ended up creating this brand. Is that right?
That is, yeah. So it's been an interesting journey. As we were kind of laughing briefly off air. So I no intentions to do this growing up, none whatsoever. I thought I was going to be Jerry Maguire. I went to
Okay.
TCU, initially sports, and then it was like, how quick can I get out, get my certification, go be an NFL agent? And
Okay.
while I was at TCU, I started interning for an agent. Went to grad school in Irving at the University of Dallas so that I could get my MBA and then go get certified. Realized I didn't want to do that. I didn't love it. It was kind of like you go to the ball game, you eat the hot dog. You don't necessarily want to see how the hot dog's made, right? I loved football. I didn't necessarily want to see behind the scenes.
Right.
And when I got out, it was 2008, which if those of us who are old enough to remember, the recession was there and I
Mhm.
couldn't get a job. I have a
Mm.
MBA in sports business. I have work experience for an agency, the Dallas Cowboys in their promotions department, substitute teacher. Like I had odd and end jobs and I couldn't even get Best Buy to hire me. And so I started just freelancing. I was
Okay.
thinking maybe I'm going to be a high school football coach. Maybe I'll move back to East Texas and get into gas stations, which is what my dad had when I was growing up. I worked in a small gas station in a little Texas town
Okay.
and ultimately just started doing some marketing consulting and had success. I taught
Mhm.
myself graphic design, web design, social media was super new.
Yeah.
I wasn't the agency guy, but I was like, hey, if you need a small business website, I'm your guy. And
Mhm.
started having success. And one client referred me to another, And it got to a point where I'm living in Dallas. I'm single. I'm making six figures. I'm driving a new toy car, going out on the weekends. And I was pretty miserable. And the way I
Ah,
look at it, I was 50, 60 pounds heavier than I am now. I had really superficial relationships.
mhm.
And eventually it just kind of got to a point that after kind of some breakups and not really caring about things, I was out of alignment with who I wanted to be, the things I talked about doing, and who I was showing up as.
Yeah.
And I read a book by a guy named Donald Miller called A Million Miles in a Thousand Years. And it talks about the power of story and how our actions and lives tell others the story of what we believe is important. And I
Yes.
looked at what I was doing and I had really built an awesome sandcastle. But I was like, man, the tide's going to come in and wash away. And there's literally no evidence I've been here. No evidence I did anything
Yeah.
bigger than me. I made a bigger impact on others. So I started toying with like, how do I actually improve my life? How do I start doing things that matter more than
Right.
anything? And I started in the gym as a former athlete. Like, I've got to get back in shape. And so every
Mhm.
day I'd go into the gym and just say, how do I go a little bit harder? How do I go a little bit heavier? How do I push myself? And so day after day, I started to embrace this idea of me against me.
Yeah.
Eventually got involved in a CrossFit gym where it was really that me versus me mentality.
Yes.
And as I started talking to people and they would see the change, physically, you had the change, but mentally, I was rebuilding confidence. I was applying this same mentality to my work of, can I deliver a better project for this client than I did last time, even though they paid me the same? Like, can I challenge myself to do better?
Okay.
And eventually people were like, man, that idea resonates with me, this whole idea of me versus me. And so for me at that point,
Mhm.
I didn't know what else to do. I spent 6 to 8 months trying of how do I take this compete everyday message and do something with it? And my
Yeah.
best friend said, hey, look at t-shirts. There's a company out of Boston called Life is Good. He said, why don't
Yes.
you try shirts? Yeah. And so I did. So I had money set aside, funny enough, for a guy's trip. He and I were going to go to New Zealand. He spent
Uh-huh.
his money on an engagement ring for his wife. I ended up
You went the
deciding not to
t-shirt
go.
route.
Yeah. And I went the t-shirt route because I wasn't going to take the trip solo. So I did.
Yeah.
And I just started selling them out of the trunk of my car behind that gym in Dallas I was going to. And it started to grow.
That's
And the more people
amazing.
I talked to, the more it resonated. And that was May of 2011.
Mhm.
And I thought, just this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to sell shirts and gear for the rest of my life with the goal of how do I empower people to compete every day, to go
Mhm.
against the way I look at it now is how do we help people to turn their default behavior into a desired one? Because our
Okay.
default behavior is that, right? Discomfort we run from, go for the easy path, don't step out of our comfort zone. Man, it's
Yeah.
scrolling Instagram. We get really motivated to start, but when it's time to start, we don't really want to. And
Yes.
so we really try to say, how do we help people battle against their defaults to make it better? Because the more you go against the default, the more you change the default, the more you make it
Right.
better, you turn it into that desired. And so that's really was the goal. And as the business grew, just randomly conversations like this, somebody would ask me to come speak. I would just kind of, okay, what do you want to
Eh
hear? And they're
yeah.
like, just tell your story. And
Yeah.
I was super blessed that a VP of a hospital in Texas, after a keynote, she pulled me aside and said, go do more of this. Like, there's something here you haven't considered.
Oh,
And
great.
at the time, I was like, okay, cool. Like, she planted a seed, but I had no interest in pursuing it. All I thought was like, that was fun, but like, I'm here to
Mhm.
sell gear. Like, I want to help change people's minds. I want to help people compete.
Yes.
And flash forward a few years later, I was thinking of how to change our business for a few reasons. One, I'd recently gotten married.
Mhm.
I was traveling Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays a lot of weeks when my wife was off work. So that was not going to work long term. And
Right.
secondarily, building the business, especially for those listening, if you've ever had products or a products based business, it's hard because your cash is always sitting on a shelf. And for
Right.
me, I'd accumulated a lot of debt building the business, trying to grow to my own fault, trying to make us bigger than we were for a couple of years. But accumulated debt and paying it off was like staring at a mountain of just like every time I take 3 steps up, I take one or two back. And
Right.
it was just, there's got to be a way to one, improve the business, get us out of
Mhm.
debt, but do something bigger. And so in
Right.
2016, I came across a guy who taught speakers and he taught the performance side. And I started to fall in love with what I was learning, the things I didn't know. Invested heavily to learn this speaking business, really with
Mhm.
the idea of I'll be better at writing blogs and communicating what we do. And what
Yeah.
I found is like this is where I really think I'm led to go. And
Right.
for me, the first wall was hitting that kind of life point of I'm living a crappy story. But the second one was during the middle of the pivot. Not many people know this. I shared this at one event this past year,
Uh-huh.
and 2018 was the year we really started changing the business from solely apparel and products to where we're trying to get to today.
Mhm.
And we've done a ton of events. I stopped doing events in 2018. So we had a massive swing in revenue loss, in speed of
Yeah, yeah.
inventory turnover. And it got really bad in probably Q1 of 2019. My speaking
Mhm.
business was starting to grow, but slow. And I
Yes.
remember going through about a 2.5, 3 month stretch where I skipped my paycheck to make sure the people I had on salary could still get paid
Oh,
because
wow.
our sales were dropping off the cliff.
Yeah.
And there was one specific day I'll never forget. My Amex bill couldn't get paid. And it
Oh,
was
wow.
one of those where you got to pay it at the end of every month. And it
Uh-huh.
was like, hey, we're not going to add on fees. It's like you have to pay. And I remember my wife coming home and I'm like in tears because I'm
Oh,
not the guy who fails at this stuff. And
right.
she thinks I have testicular cancer. She thinks I'm about to tell her I have
It's
cancer.
like something's really bad here.
And I was
Yeah.
like, no, I just can't pay this bill. And she starts laughing and she's like,
Ah,
oh, my prior life, like I've had that happen before. Like this is not a big deal. I thought you had cancer. She's like,
yeah.
I've never hardly ever seen you cry except like when one of our dogs passed.
Yeah.
And I start laughing and I was like, no, like this is that. And she's like, we'll figure it out. And so what we did is I just started saying like, this is the right move. It's the hardest
Mm,
decision I made, but this is the right move. And so I just
mhm.
kept working the field, praying for a harvest.
Right.
And I didn't quit. And every day that I got up during that time and I wanted to just mentally crawl in a hole, one, I had to remind myself, what's your brand? Right. And then the
Yeah.
second, I
Yes.
continually went back to like great stories are not smooth sales. And a guy
Correct.
on my team that he wasn't working. We let most of our team, we had to let most of our contractors and team go just to kind of survive.
Mhm.
And I remember one of the guys who I'm still super close with today, he was like, man, I understand the situation, but he's like, here's what I want you to remember. If you give up, you lose the ability to use this as part of your story. And he said, man, what a great chapter in your story this will be if you
I
keep
love
going.
it. I love it.
And that was kind of the reminder of like if we give up in the storms, we rob the people who we could inspire later of what's
Yeah.
possible. And so, yeah, those were kind of those two big moments. And the why that got me through it was like, I believe I was called on a mission to help people. And
Yes.
for me, going through that situation of in college, especially of running from discomfort and fear of
Mhm.
failure and leaning into what my default said instead of understanding my desired was something greater, but I had to go create it.
Yeah.
Really breaks my heart when I see other people do the same because I think a lot of us go through life on autopilot and we get
Correct.
really upset with what the result we end up with without realizing the intentional steps we can take can change everything if we're courageous enough to do it, which is
Yes.
why I embrace the whole chief encouragement officer through and through.
Yes. Courageous enough. You said it right there. And the me versus me mentality, that's really but that's a very powerful phrase right there. Me versus me because it's so relevant. It's so relevant. I can think of a handful of interactions I've had with people over the last couple of weeks that would exhibit that me versus me mentality that you just want to go, "Ooh." And I love yeah, if you give up now, think of the people that you're robbing by not allowing your story to be your story and what you're going to motivate people with and feeling that calling to a higher purpose.
Yeah, the me versus me, I always kind of love to press on that because like we are the only person we control.
Yeah.
And what happens is when we go through life and it's always me versus you, then you're going to go through a situation, which I did at 18, and you're going to find yourself in a spot where you don't have anybody to compete it directly with, measure up with. And
Mhm.
you have a huge loss of identity because if all of your worth and all of your happiness is improving, I'm better than you, and then other people aren't in that same race, then you're going to struggle. The other
Yeah.
thing you're really going to struggle with is when you constantly are competing with someone else, you have no idea if the other person has more or less potential than you. And I think
Yeah.
about that standpoint of you think about a great athlete, and we talked about your daughter, a beach volleyball player, right? Stud athlete. If all she cared about was being better than the person on her high school team,
Mhm.
that played the same position,
Mhm.
but wasn't even going to have talent to play at junior college, then your daughter's probably not going to play at one of the best programs in the nation now.
Yeah.
But the fact that she's, how do I be my best? I'm not worried about where everybody else is. I'm just focused on making me better. Then she has a chance to reach that potential. And I think that's where we really get off track in life is we compare ourselves to someone who doesn't have the same abilities and talents as we do. And we rob ourselves
Right.
of finding out who we are. Or we look at the people who are 20 years ahead of us and don't even try because, well, so-and-so's already done it and they're so far ahead.
Yes. That's that what does they say? Comparison is the thief of joy?
You have joy. Yep.
I mean, how do you have a relationship with yourself and live at your fullest potential by comparing yourself to other situations that you don't even know? Like, you're just seeing the
Yeah.
surface.
You just see what's on social media, which is never the case. And that's the funny part about like what I just shared on that 2018, like during the keynote, because it was to a ton of business owners who were kind of going through like chasing shiny objects. I pulled up my social media from those days. I was like,
Yeah.
here is the exact day I wrote this letter. I said, look at this. It's motivational quotes. It smiles. Like everything
Yeah.
seems like it's going well. Like, don't believe what you see online. When you
Right.
look at another company, don't believe what you see online. Like focus on what you control, which is who you see in the mirror.
Yes. The highlight reels are big time.
Highlight reels are big time.
I mean, um, you are obviously a very self-motivated individual because if we think about the fact that you started selling t-shirts out of the trunk of your car, right? Like that's
Yeah.
a big leap of faith. And I know that you explained that you were at a place where you're like, I've got to make a change. I'm really unhappy with where I'm at, who I am. And you took that leap to do something completely different. Completely.
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny hearing you say it like that because for me, like everything in my career, like especially consulting, was like, let's see if it works. Like, let's
Okay.
give it a shot. And it was really just one of those ideas I pulled at. My identity wasn't wrapped up in how well it did yet because it was just an idea and experiment I wanted to test. I wanted to
Okay.
see, is this the path? Is this the way? And I had done so many different things. Like I, for the longest was like, well, my career is going to be a sports agent. And
Mhm.
so that's all I'm focused on. And then that didn't work out. And I was like, well, anything else I do is just kind of how do I make money and survive? Right. For
Yeah.
me, the bigger loss of identity was in sports, like walking away from opportunities to play at the collegiate level
Mhm.
because I was afraid of failing. That robbed me
Ooh,
more. That rocked my world for years because
really?
my identity was in as a quarterback and an athlete.
Yeah.
And I was afraid of failing at that because
Yeah.
if I fail, what an identity is I have? So I ran from it because then I
Yeah.
could be like, well, I can kind of keep it. And so
Yes.
that was a tougher adjustment for me to where everything else later in life was like, let's figure it out. Like,
Yeah.
hey, and I'll laugh. Like the one thing about selling apparel that I've learned over and over again is you have no idea what the outcomes are. The shirts that you do not think are going to do well explode.
Yeah.
The ones you think are going to do great don't. And so
Yeah.
you have to learn, as I have, divorce yourself from the outcome and marry the process because the
I
outcomes
love
we
it.
don't control, but the process we do. What's our effort? What's our attitude? What's our consistency? Who do we show up as? That's the only thing we control. And when we can find our worth and our confidence and our purpose in the process and just let the outcome take care of itself,
Yeah.
then we know some days I'm going to win, some days I'm going to lose. But if I do everything I can to put myself in a position I win, I'm going to learn something and do it better the next time.
Yeah. How do you help people understand that releasing that mentality, releasing that identity that you've held on to? Because I love the picture that you painted about I did not choose to go that direction collegiately, athletically, because I could still hold on to a piece of that for me and something that you wrestled with. How do you help people understand that letting go of that, like loosening up that grip, if you will, is has far-reaching advantages for them if they can just trust the process? How do you help people lean into the process?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it starts with a couple things. How do we see ourselves, and
Mhm.
how do we reinforce or reaffirm our identity? So, if you think about like in your hands holding two quarters, and you're gripping those 2 quarters as tight as you possibly can. And I say, okay, if I try to pull those 2 quarters out, they're mine. And so you're going to grip them as hard as possible. Well, then if I try to give you $100 bill, you can keep gripping the quarters as tightly as possible, or you can drop the quarters and grab the bill.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot of times in our life is that $100 bill has so much more to it, right? You can break it into 100 ones, you can have 10 tens, you can have 520. There's diversity to that versus the 2 quarters or 2 quarters. There's no changing those 2 quarters, right? And the way I think about it is like an athlete is only part of who you are. Like right now, I speak for a living, and most people say, "Oh, you're a motivational speaker." I'm like, speaking is what I do. Teaching, I love it.
Yeah.
But what I really love to do is helping leaders. And so I see myself as a that's why I always refer to it, chief encouragement officer, because that is something, regardless of what I do, will always be a part of me. I want to be an encourager. I'm also a husband. I'm a dog dad. So the more things I can do and find value and identity in, the less I am locked into, if I lose my voice and I can no longer get on stages and speak, do I lose value? No. I just have to change how I communicate and what I do.
Oh, I love
And
that.
yeah, you miss, like I love being on stage. I love teaching, but if I miss that, are there not still ways I can write? Are there not
Yeah.
still ways I can do other things? And so the more you put into your identity and how you see yourself is key. This is why parents a lot of times struggle when kids leave the nest. And I say this not as a parent, but as a child,
Yeah.
when you see yourself solely as the parent. Because when the child leaves and becomes an adult and grows, that relationship changes, and they still need you, but they don't need you in the same way. And there's a
Yes.
loss of identity. And if you only see yourself as that, then you don't see everything else that you're capable of. So the biggest one is starting to identify what are the other parts of you,
Yeah.
and seeing yourself not as a single piece, but a full puzzle. And a puzzle has
Right.
many pieces, and that's fantastic. And then just talking, being intentional of how you talk about yourself, of,
Oh,
hey,
yeah.
my name's Jake. I love pouring into people. How I do it, I'm a speaker. I write, I coach, I do these things, but who I am is just somebody that cares about seeing people win. And so the more you change how you talk about yourself, how you introduce yourself, how you do these things, the more it's going to start to become ingrained, and this is who I am. And in those moments of doubts, you can refer back to. It's no different than when we struggle with confidence. I did an episode this past month on our podcast and wrote an article about it, of what do you pack in your carry-on? As a guy who
Yeah.
travels, like I tried 15 different carry-on backpacks, bags, shoulder pads, suitcases. Like everyone's different. I didn't find the ones I love, right? I need it to do exactly what I want it to do. But you pack your carry-on a certain way for convenience, and so you can quickly access what you need. It's the
Yes.
complete opposite, in my opinion, of my wife's bag, where she's
Okay.
like, just find my keys. They're in the bottom buried with 50,000 things. Now, the funny part is she can reach in there and find those keys in an instant. It's going to take me
Okay.
20 minutes. Why? Because she packed the bag. She knows what's
Yeah.
in it. The
Yeah.
same goes to our confidence. When we lack confidence, it's important that we've mentally packed a bag. We review in the past where we've done challenging things in other areas, where we've made bold decisions, where we've done because it's in those moments that you're scared to take that first step, that you can look back and say, well, you put in for that job promotion 5 years ago that you didn't feel confident, ready for, and you crushed it and got it, and you've done well in the job. It's the same decision you're making now in a new venue. And so that's why, like, we have to go back and build a memory bank, a mental carry-on. Some people call it a locker room or a file cabinet, of where
Yeah.
we pull out key stuff to resort and reference back to when we need it. And the same goes
Yes.
with your identity. The more you can reference back to the different aspects and facets of who you are, the more you'll do well.
Yeah, it's diversifying. I love you said that a little bit ago. It's that diversity of who you are, not what you do
Yep.
necessarily. Like serving you and how you serve your community, if you will. And finding that for you so that you are at your fullest potential. Because I think that's the next thing too. What's the first step to be able to do that? We all have, like, I love what you said earlier too, scrolling on Instagram and being like, "That's a great idea. I think I
So
can do that."
motivated.
And then you're like, "Oh my God, I have to do that to get to that point."
Yep.
And it's almost like a freeze that we have a lot of times. And it's not that you're not capable of it, but what do you do? Like, how do you bolster that confidence you were just talking about to find that? Is it that memory bank that you're talking about?
I
Building that.
mean, you build confidence by doing the thing. Like that's the unfortunate part of what people don't understand. Waiting to be confident for it doesn't happen. You do
Mhm,
the thing and you do the thing and you do the thing and you get bored of doing the thing, and then you start to become confident that you can do the thing. It's building the stack of evidence that
mhm.
says you can do the thing you want to do. And so in those moments when you're scared to start, a couple of reasons, right? We lack confidence in our ability to be perfect at the beginning
Okay.
versus embracing the idea that I'm a work in progress and the start is
Mhm,
always sloppy. Like when you understand your expectations are set, that it's going to be messy at the beginning and that's okay, you behave differently. It's like for those that get into a race, if you go into a race thinking it's going to be easy and you're running a marathon
mhm.
and you're like, it's a marathon, it's going to be easy. And about a third of the way through the race, it gets really hard. You're
Yeah.
mentally going to be done if you finish the race. Why? Because you get hit with the reality that your expectations were out of alignment. You thought
Mhm.
this was going to be smooth and easy and didn't hurt, and now your feet are on fire and you got a stabbing side pain, right?
Yeah.
You are unprepared. But if you go into the race because you've trained hard
Mhm.
and you know, like, this is not going to be easy, but I'm going to do it, then
Yeah.
you approach it very differently. And the same goes at the start. We get this disillusioned idea that the start, the process, the goal, the things we're motivated to do should be easy and simple.
Mhm.
If we're talented, it should be easy and simple. Otherwise, we shouldn't do it. But
Right.
the beginning is always messy. And I tell everyone it's the idea that you play a musical instrument. Like it doesn't matter. I laugh with audiences on stage of like, if somebody in the audience has played an instrument for 15, 20 years,
Mhm.
I'm like, man, I could take that instrument, put it here on the stage, bring you up here, roll in the bars in the back, and everybody would have a drink and enjoy listening to you.
Yeah.
Because we know if you played for 15 to 20 years, you can play a little bit.
Yeah.
But if we
Right.
flash back to day one, there's not enough alcohol in the bar for us to sit and listen to you for an hour
Yeah.
because you're
Yeah.
not going to be good. But
Yeah.
nobody expects to pick up a musical instrument on day one and be great. They
Yes.
understand I can get better, but we expect ourselves to be perfect. So it's releasing the expectation that it's going to be easy, quick, or I'm going to be great from the start. And then the
Mhm.
second thing is to stop letting your focus and vision go to everything needed and just say, what's the first step? Oh my God, I'm
Oh, first
overwhelmed. I
step.
don't know how to start a business. I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
Cool. Why don't you just Google first thing, how to file an LLC with your state? Download the paperwork. Start
Yeah.
there. You can be a single member, you want to be a group. Okay. First step.
Yeah.
Second day, how do I get my sales and use tax? Like pick a small thing to do every day instead of I can't start a business. I don't know how to be an accountant. I don't know marketing. You're not even there yet. Like just start.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Release the confines that we have in our brain that we have to be perfect about this or in this capacity from the get-go.
Yep.
I love what you talk about being messy because that's how we all start something that we don't know a lot about or that we may have a lot of passion about, but the rules and the regulations and the things that kind of go with it to make it all start to flow can be a little bit ugh, a little bit sloppy, if you will, messy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the reason we avoid it is because of our ego, right? We
Yeah.
we worry what
Yeah.
other people are going to think or how messy it is, but really it's because we care what other people are going to think and say about us if we
Yes.
fail. And I always go back to like lifting in the gym,
Yeah.
and the only way you get stronger is by getting under weights that are uncomfortable. And if you've
Mhm.
ever gone for a PR or a max, whatever it is, whether it's a race or a lift, you've failed. Like there's
Right.
not been a point where you have like not gotten underweight heavier than you can lift and you fail and you learn, okay, my new max is 5 pounds below this. What do I
Right.
need to do to get stronger? You don't beat yourself up for failing. You don't consider yourself, you're just like, I'm not strong enough for that yet. Let me go back to training. And the
Yeah.
training is messy and it's uncomfortable, but you get better with it. And it's no different in life. We tend to either tell ourselves a story that if we were supposed to be good at this, if we were destined to be good at it, then it would just be natural and easy because we see everyone else and we assume it's easy without
Yeah.
realizing the reps that go in. And this was like my new book, Lead Better Now. Like this was the opening story. My wife came into my office upset because she had been in management for about 2.5, 3 years at this point. But
Mhm.
she's in real estate in Texas. They didn't slow down for 2020, 21, 22. It
Yeah.
was only when the mortgage rate started shifting that it started to slow. And
Mhm.
when that happened, she had to get out of production mode to leading her team. And she was
Mhm.
struggling because she had never had to do that before. And her manager sucked. I
Okay.
say that, I say it to her face. She was not a good manager. She did not train my wife. My wife had
Oh,
no idea what to
no.
do. And my
Oh,
poor
no.
wife was like, I'm a failure. Everywhere else I look, they know what they're doing. And I was like, no, 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 no. What do you think I get on a plane and go do every week? This is what
Yeah.
I teach. Like,
Yeah.
nobody knows what they're doing because we promote really talented people into leadership and we assume they know what to do. And I said, you making the assumption is what we see on social, and what that's doing is causing you shame and beating yourself up for not being perfect at something no one else actually is either. And the people
Mm.
who are doing really well had a teacher and had a lot of reps. You didn't have
Yes.
either. So you're
Yeah.
essentially at day zero. So when you understand you're at day zero and you give yourself the grace of being at day zero, then you start to change how you show up and work through that process, which is when you can actually improve.
Yes, it's giving yourself the grace to understand that. I love that too, because if you don't give yourself that grace and that space, then you never attempt it. You
Yep.
never go there. And I love the realizing the reps that a former trainer from my past life here in CrossFitter extraordinaire, love me some good CrossFit. It makes complete sense. You don't question the fact that you may be discouraged that you didn't hit that PR, but you're not going to question it and put all of that relevance in your mind about what's going on. Why isn't this happening? Why didn't this hit? Why did this go this way? Blah, 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 blah. The whole storytelling script that we have in our brains. You just realize, all right, well, I'm going to try it again. Or, all right, I know what I have to do to get stronger for the next time we do this PR. So,
100%. And it
yeah,
motivates you, right? Because you
motivate.
see, here's
Yeah.
where my new PR is. So I hit my one PR, but then I failed at the next level up.
Mhm.
So I've gotten stronger. How do I keep going? And so that's
Yes.
where we've got to have that progress. We've got to have that growth because it builds confidence in what we're capable of while motivating us on how much farther we can go.
Yeah. Tell me exactly how the phrase compete every day popped into your head. Where were you when that kind of popped for you?
Um, it's an interesting one, right? The real sitter for me was the initial idea for the brand was this idea of like stacked. And it was the idea of pursuing greatness every day. And I looked at like your health, your relationships, your career, your faith, your life. Like, what would it look like if you were stacked and being intentional in every area?
Mm,
And I kept toying of like pursue greatness pursue every day, stacked every day, and nothing was like sticking. And I was on a ski trip with buddies, two buddies who were driving from Texas to Durango, Colorado. And I was like, what about like compete every day? Like being competitive every day. And they were just like, that's you, man. That fits.
yeah.
I had been doing, like I said, I've been doing CrossFit for a little bit. It was all about how are you competing and pushing yourself. And I was like,
Yes.
man, what about this? And both of them were like, this is you. This fits. Like, run with it. And so
Yeah.
that's really where that idea started. And then it was just like, what the heck do I do with it now? I got a cool brand name, but I don't know what to do with it until we
Right.
eventually got to shirts.
Well, I love that the message speaks to so many different people in such a broad manner. And from the very simplistic pieces of getting through your day, getting through a workout to getting through rehab.
Yep.
I listened to part of a podcast of yours that, you put up back in March. You spoke with, a gentleman that had fallen from a roof
Yep.
that, should by all means, should have passed away from that.
Should have died. Yeah.
Yeah, and you gave some really, really um, interesting feedback that you had received from people along your path that had that compete everyday mentality and that message that helped them get through those different points. So, how fundamental, I mean, if you look at that and you think about, I could have hit a wall. I could have decided it's messy. I don't want to do this. I don't know how to do this. But it just expands to so many different people. The ripple that that one little decision made for you to start, putting this logo on t-shirts and getting it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us we underestimate the impact of the things we do, right?
Mhm.
And we had a shirt years ago that always said, "Easy doesn't make you proud," and it's true.
Yeah.
It's never the easy things that we do in life that become our proudest moments and our biggest achievements. And when I think about that, it's like, how do you go against the default programming of what's easy? and you don't see the ripple effect of it, right? I don't see the ripple effect of some of the conversations I had early in my career
Mhm.
with friends who gave me incredibly wise advice that
Mhm.
impacted the direction I'm on now, right? That VP in Houston had no idea when she planted the seed of you should go do more of this, that would have stuck.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot of times is we get so self-centered focused in our struggles in the mess that we forget to ask, what happens if I don't give up? Who can I help if I keep showing up?
Oh, I
And when you
love
take the
that.
focus off of yourself and put it onto someone else, it starts
Mhm.
to change how you show up. It starts to change that moment. I tell speakers when you're getting ready, new speakers, when you're getting ready at the stage, you're going to have some energy in you, right? It can
Yeah.
be nerves. If you did not prepare, it's nerves. If you're
Yeah.
worried about what you're going to say and what the audience is going to think about you, it's nerves. That's bad. But if you see that energy as a performance enhancer because it's gratitude and excitement for what you've prepared to do, what you're about to do, and that your focus is on how do I help people versus
Mhm.
how do I get them to clap for me, it changes
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm.
Changes everything. And I think that's something that time and time again you see with high performers is they take moments of discomfort, they take moments of challenges and say, how do I make this not about just me? And there's
Yeah.
a really good comedian, I want to say his last name. I think it's Michael Johnson.
Okay.
Michael Jr. Michael Jr. If you're a fan of comedy, he's on Instagram, Michael Jr. Comedy. But he's
Okay.
a phenomenal comedian, super great guy. He's a man of faith. But he talked about years ago, he made the switch from trying to get people to laugh at his jokes to how can I share laughter?
Okay.
How do I get people to not just laugh at my jokes? How do I, because why? Laughing at the jokes validates me. It builds my ego. It makes me feel good. But how can I share
Yeah.
laughter, which is a feeling, which is fun, which is a bond? That changed everything about what he does. And he has
Yes.
story on story of kids who just have been through traumatic instances and don't talk to people and they've come up and wanted to talk to him or they've laughed. Like
Mm.
that shifts the focus of, hey, it's really uncomfortable to do this thing. How do I
Yeah.
not make it all about me, but how do I make it about others? And so I
Yeah.
think when we can start to embrace that mentality, we start to show up in the mess differently because we see, hey, I'm a work
Yes.
in progress and why I'm showing up is more important than what I'm going through. And eventually I'm going to get to where we get through this storm. And then I'm going to have the opportunity, because I went through that, to inspire and help other people who are also going through that.
Right. What happens if I don't give up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't
What
help other
happens if
people to swim if you give up in the waves.
Right. Yeah. And just as here's a full circle moment in our talk. It goes back to if you hadn't have stuck with it, what story would you be here telling? What would you be
Probably
motivating?
not be having one. We honestly, I don't
Yeah,
know what I would be doing.
golly. So tell me a little bit about the 2 books that you wrote and what those mean to you personally. The first one, Compete Every Day, obviously is like the benchmark for you and everything basically that we're talking about today, I understand. But personally, like that's your baby book. Like what does that really mean for you? Oh, I lost your volume.
Me, that was me.
There
That
you
was
go.
me. I hit it when I moved my mic. So for years, people told me I should write a book, and I put it off for the same reasons we put off a lot of things. Right? There's a million
Mhm.
books out there. Who am I? I don't have anything to say. And when I eventually did it, the final push over the edge was I lost opportunities to speak and help people because I didn't have a book. Groups
Oh,
chose other
wow.
speakers who had books. So my competitive side came out and was like, all right, I'll have one done. But then when I got into it, I wrote the first 40 or 50,000 words, hated it, didn't like
Yeah.
it. It was based on a corporate talk. And I'd gotten an opportunity to speak to Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Dallas. And I thought,
Mhm.
I'm going to have 8 to 18-year-olds in this room and like 30 to 50-year-old bigs. I got to
Yeah.
have something that hits both. And so I made a list of what are 8 catchy phrases that are life-changing advice if applied.
Mhm.
And as I was going through it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is the book. So the
That's your
idea of
there you
outwork your
go.
talent, choose your starting lineup, all of this. So I rewrote it, rewrote the whole book, did it, and then published it. And really the goal was like, man, I hope a few people read it. Like that was kind of it. Like, I hope this eliminates the speaking issue. And
Yeah.
it's been a really awesome journey for me, because one, it still opens doors all the time to get
Mhm.
to impact other people, but just the conversations I get to have around it.
Yeah.
And so for me, it is definitely that baby uh, that I still love and will always be kind of that first book that we push.
Yes.
It took me years to write book two. One, because the writing process is not the most enjoyable.
Yes.
And two, I
Challenging.
couldn't
Mhm.
commit to what I wanted to write on until that
Mm.
conversation that day with my wife. And when she walked
Mhm.
in the office and said that's the book. And so I cranked it out. And so book two, Lead Better Now, is for people who've been thrown into management, who are new to managing, or who want to manage.
Uh-huh.
And it's just, how do you actually start leading? Like, how do you
Okay.
lead yourself? And then how do you connect with other people, communicate with them, and then lead them? Because managing is task oriented, but leading is
Mhm.
people. And so
Yeah.
that second book is really a strategic playbook, much more than the first book. It's downloads, it's a play by play guide of like, how do you actually become a leader?
Okay.
And I wrote that one very intentionally because I know that, like, the first book is all lead yourself. Book two is lead yourself, then lead others. Book
Yes.
three that I'm working on slowly
Oh, exciting. Okay.
is almost every event I speak at, somebody says, I wish my kid was in the audience. And do you have anything I could share with them?
Oh,
And I
wow.
don't. And so what I'm doing is
Mm.
taking some of the concepts from Compete Every Day, and I'm writing a book very specifically for high school and college athletes,
No, it's
similar
perfect.
themes. And then that one, and then we'll do a kids book at the end of the year. And then I have another adult book for next year that we'll get to. But the idea is like, it's really hard sometimes for kids to be like, yeah, I'm going to read this because mom or dad gave it to me. Right.
Right.
But how can I
Amen.
write a book to say, listen, this is specifically for you? It's some of this
Mhm.
stuff you read in the adult book, but what I want to do is write a book that, yeah, it's applicable for kids, but coaches would want to read, parents would want to read.
Yeah.
And so that's really where I'm trying to write that next one, because it's not an audience I speak to.
Mhm.
As I laugh, like, the two hardest groups I've ever had to speak in front of are college athletes and US Army generals. And they're about the same, because they give you no expression. Like, your words
Very
can
flat.
land, they can love it, but you get nothing facial expression. And I said, but I'm really passionate because that was the age when I wish I knew this stuff and I made decisions that I regretted for years after. And
Yeah.
so I really want to find a way of, how do I pour into them this book, and encourage them by it. So that's kind of the impetus and really the inspiration for all of those.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, who knows what the future has, but really it's just like, how do I, when I see a need and it's the people I want to pour into, how do I help them continue to go against the flow of what feels good, feels natural, or what the rest of the world says, to do
Yeah.
something different in order to achieve something different.
Yeah, that's a big thing. You tap into that for people, and when people really, really can figure that out about themselves, that's where success happens. That's where it starts. That's where motivation kicks in. That's where all of those attributes really come home to roost, if you will.
Yep.
Like, and as I'm listening to you talking about the unfolding of the plans that you have going on, I think to myself, gosh, your life has really unfolded in a really beautiful synchronistic way, and how what you began as is not where you are in terms of the
Nope.
mentality of, this is my path that I want to go. Like the path that you instinctually had said, this is, or you're not instinctually, you're following your instincts rather, but your planned path, I will say, was X, Y, and Z. I'm going to do this to get to this, do this to get to this. And as much as there's got to be some of that planning, tell me a little bit about that prospect, because you do have to put some of that planning into work. But I really see you as this person that has just allowed your life to unfold and be a witness to the things that are coming up and kind of flowing with that.
I would say, I mean, the flowing and adaptability is a big piece of it. Like, I strategically set things, but what I'm not afraid to do is test stuff. And a lot of that's
Mm.
to a fault, right?
Okay.
I early on, my apparel company, were like, man, we're not growing fast enough. Maybe there's something off. So we'd start like a spinoff brand. And
Yeah.
we would think like, oh, if we just had the right one design or two, everything would take off. And so those distractions hurt the progress of where
Mhm.
we could be. But it was really saying, like, what is my core mission? Which is to encourage and equip people who want to be great on how to be great. Like, that is it.
Yeah.
Where do I see opportunities to do that? And if I see an opportunity that does it, and then I find that there's an alignment with a skill set that I have more natural ability toward,
Mhm.
how do I then further build that ability? So the speaking on stage is one. where I have tons of coaching I've gotten from it. I put in tons of hours prepping it. It's not like, hey, you're just a good speaker, go on stage. Like I
Yeah.
put hours and hours into it because what I want to do is double down on where there's strengths
Mhm.
and enhance them versus trying to do things that naturally have more friction for me.
Mhm.
And when you say yes to things for a while, you start to figure out here's where I'm good, here's where I'm not. Then what a lot of people do is they still keep saying yes to everything versus learning to start saying no to the things
Okay.
you're not very good at, right?
Okay.
There are people in sales organizations who need to say no to becoming a manager. Not
Yes.
because they don't want to make an impact, not because they don't want to grow, but because I know I'm really good at sales and I really enjoy it. I don't want
Yeah.
to manage tasks. I want to get out and meet people and sell items, and I need to be okay with that. And so that's where being open to exploring things until you get the right matchup of where you can add the most value and where there's opportunity for it, and then
Mhm.
being able to say no to everything else.
Yeah.
That's where that alignment really comes in because it allows you to focus in on that much better.
Yeah, and it's that mentality I think that a lot of times by saying no to certain things and just jumping in and throwing all the ping pong balls up in the air at one time and saying yes to everything is because we come from a lack mentality that if I
Yep.
just commit to this one thing, then I'm not it's the fear. I don't know that it'll happen. If I throw everything there, then there's a possibility for something to stick.
But every time you say yes to all of those things, you're saying no to other priorities.
Yeah. Yeah. Mic drop. There you go. Yeah. Amen. Hallelujah. Yeah. And that's really hard, I think, for a lot of people to relinquish that because that's that, you talk about it circles back to ego, all back to ego and
Yep.
that base. Tell me a little bit about the world needs you living at your full potential. That belief, has that always been something that's inside of you? Have you always kind of as an athlete, as a kid, have you always kind of gravitated towards that competitive and that uplifting kind of piece?
Um, as a kid, definitely from the standpoint of I was always the smaller athlete. So I was
Mhm.
always the guy who was going to have to outwork you or outsmart you to play. And my coaches knew that. They knew what buttons to push because I wasn't as physically big or as physically dominant as other guys. And so for me, it was like I have to wring out every ounce of ability, which means I have to do everything to outwork you.
Yeah.
That's always kind of been part of me. I mean, even as a speaker, like I know the people that a lot of times other groups consider, there's celebrities, there's
Mhm.
athletes, there's people that have done way cooler things than I have.
Mhm.
So I have to outwork you on what kind of experience you get once I'm in the room and how well I do at teaching, not just making audiences feel good. And so I'm
Yeah.
very, very much still carry that. But in a very personal sense, like you even go back to Bronnie Ware's book, The Five Regrets of the Dying. And Bronnie worked in hospice and she interviewed all these people at the end of her life. And the number one regret you always saw was like people that lived up to others' expectations instead of pursuing theirs.
Mm,
And what always kills me about that is people get to the end of their life, realize like I never found out what I was truly capable of, and there's no time on the clock to change it. And
right.
that was the thing that always got me about school is like when I walked away from football, I never gave myself a chance to figure out, could I actually do it? Because you're
Yeah.
so scared of losing. You're scared of, you got to protect your ego. And so having gone through that experience, I know that's the one thing I want to keep others from. I want to see
Mhm.
people struggle and deal with challenges because I believe challenges make us resilient and gritty. But the
Yeah.
one thing I never want to see people do is walk away because they're afraid of failing because
Mhm.
the baggage they're going to carry from that decision and the shame and the regret is far heavier than the one if they were like, well, it didn't work out. Let me try something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a great story for you on my oldest daughter
Okay.
in that same vein. She had numerous coaches tell her, "Now listen, you're probably not gonna play collegiate ball. It's probably not gonna happen. So if you are, let's look at a JUCO or let's look at an NAIA. Let's look that direction because, you're this size, you're this stature, you have to work really hard. You've never been on the top team. So let's just look realistically at it." And I remember her coming to me and saying, "I'm really interested in this. If I don't try this, I won't know. If it doesn't work out, okay. But if I don't go after it, I'm never going to know. And she was all of 17 years old when she said that to me. And I went, hmm, yeah, yeah, yeah. And do you know that she put that out there and it wasn't all the ping pong balls, it was a couple of very deliberate ping pong balls. And one stuck. And she said, okay, here's my opportunity. Now, what can I do with my opportunity? Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
As a 17-year-old. And I think that we have those innate natures inside of us. But I think also as we grow and mature and we see life and we have those experiences that aren't so warm and fuzzy and the stuff that we go through and different experiences, traumas, I mean, everything that we can encounter along our life, it can create something so jaded in us that makes us automatically go, I'm not worth it. It's not going to work if I try it anyway. The shame that you talked about earlier, all of that kind of stuff kind of starts coming up too. But
Yeah.
if you follow that innate, that seed that I think we all have inside of us, that potential you talked about, finding the world needs you living at your full potential. Finding that seed, that potential is super important to the community that you serve, whatever
Absolutely.
capacity that is. So I want to ask you before we go on to fun rapid fire questions. I want to know what the hardest challenge has been for you throughout all of this and how you think that challenge has shaped you as a person today in the role that you're in and what you're currently doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, twofold, right? Externally, it was building the business to where it is now, solely from a standpoint of getting out of the debt. Like that
Mhm.
was mentally the struggle and the easiest reasons to call it quit.
Mhm.
Um, if you've ever been a business owner and have had to skip payrolls and had bills late and all that, you know the weight that that carries alone. The
Yes.
second thing I would say is the biggest struggle is just maintaining focus, right? It's being so laser locked in on what are you doing, who are you
Mhm.
serving, and how are you doing it that you don't allow things outside of your control. You don't allow other opportunities that aren't aligned with what you're ultimately trying to do distract you. Because
Mhm.
as a kid with ADHD and a entrepreneur, like there's all sorts of opportunities all the time that could easily distract you, and
Yeah.
they will if you allow them. And so for me, it's just being laser locked in on it and continuing to play the long game versus getting caught up in the short game, caught up in the quick buck and all of that, so that we
Mhm.
make sure that we're continuing to show up for the people that we need to, and playing it not just for a year but multiple years.
Right. Play the long game. That's
Yep.
perfect. Yeah, absolutely, because that's where it really matters. That's where you're gonna reap your harvest. I know you spoke about that earlier too. Like you prayed for a harvest. That's where you're gonna reap it. And understanding that that longevity is something that is so, so, so important. And trusting the process. I like that one too. Always
Yep.
trust the process. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?
Hopefully still doing what I'm doing now, right? The goal is continuing speaking. A few more books out at that point. We'll have a couple of courses that'll be there as well. But I would say the biggest difference is probably the number of times I'm on the road as we continue to grow that year over year, but also having some team members as well that can help deliver some of this content for us. We're very
Okay.
much in the process of building out some of the IP and systems that I'm currently teaching
Mhm.
so we can scale, because the goal at the end of the day is how do we help more people. And so to do that, I'm going to need some help.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I see us. If I'm not living here in the Frisco area, I'm definitely going to be in Fort Worth at that point as well. So
There you
that may
go.
be one of the other changes.
Okay, okay. Back to the Go Frogs. Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, man, Jake, it has been such a gift to have you on the podcast today and to be able to listen to all these beautiful gems that you have dropped. I mean, and I would encourage everyone to, first of all, check out the podcast, Compete Every Day. Second, go buy a shirt, go buy some merch because it's meaningful. It's meaningful. And your words have power. And that phrase has so much power that it can just cross so many different layers in your life that you can find that phrase as an applicable meaning for you. Um, be it your day, like I said earlier, be it the day, be it the year, be it the month, whatever it is you're struggling with. And then I just want to say Gosh, good luck with all of your books. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Everything that's unfolding for you seems to just be so it's just a beautiful story that you're writing. It
Thank you.
really is. Yeah, absolutely. Are you down for some rapid fire questions?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So I like to do this to kind of wrap up to see another side of the personality. And although I feel like we've seen a good side of your personality so far today, but this is going to be fun. All right. Are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay. Question number one. What was your very first job ever?
So first job was working at my dad's little gas station in
Okay.
East Texas. That was where I grew up, in our small town little gas station. I think the only thing I did before that that would be considered a job, although my mom dies of embarrassment, is I sold Christmas cookies door to door in April.
Okay.
April. So they were like
Wait.
months old. And I was like, I don't know, 6 or 7. And when my mom found out when I got home, I had my cash and she was ticked. She was
Oh
so
no.
embarrassed. She made me return the money, get the cookies back. She's like, these are old cookies. I was like, they bought them. She's like, not because you were good at sales. I was like, I was kind of good at sales. So
Oh
I
my
always
goodness.
laughed that my first job was selling Christmas cookies door to door in April. But the probably real one was working in the gas station.
Okay. Okay. I love that. You were motivated at 6
I
years old.
was.
I mean, come
Let's
on. You
go.
saw an opportunity.
I needed to buy more baseball cards and comics. That's what I saw.
There you go. Motivated, motivated. Yeah. All right, question number 2. What is your favorite dessert?
I have a massive sweet tooth, so homemade chocolate chip cookies are probably at the top of the list.
Oh my goodness. We make the best. If I ever run into you in Texas, I'm
Fair
gonna
enough.
bring you a batch of our
There
homemade
we
cookies.
there we go.
You think I'm joking? I am not
I'm
joking.
I'm I'm not. It's this is on a recording. There's evidence. There's
It is
evidence.
total evidence. You got it. Absolutely. All right, question number 3. Do you think that you could win a game show?
Ooh, I feel pretty confident I could win. I feel good about a Wheel of
Yeah.
Fortune.
Oh, I
Feel
love that. Yeah.
Jeopardy not as much.
Yeah.
Especially watching some of those people. But Wheel of Fortune, I think I could go on. I think some of the other game shows I watch, like I'm in for, but yeah, no, that Wheel of Fortune is the one I probably feel safest on.
Yeah, Wheel of Fortune has been around for days. Do you remember Price is Right around my dating myself?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean,
Like,
that would be another fun one with Drew Carey. There's a really cool
yeah,
book you should read called The Third Door. And it
okay.
talks about the guy who learned all the ins and outs on The Price is Right and used it to leverage and build his career. Anyway, it's a fascinating story about looking for opportunities in places you don't find it
The Third
typically.
Door.
Third Door,
About The
Alex
Price is Right?
something. Um,
Okay,
but yeah, it's really interesting how he got on the show and then what he
okay.
did with it and how he's built a career that I think you'll have fun with.
Oh my god, okay. I'm writing it down. Third Door. Okay. All right, question number 4. Given the opportunity, would you travel to the past or to the future?
Hmm. I don't even want to know if I want to know what the future looks like in some
Mm,
cases.
I get that.
You know, it depends. Am I going back to observe or participate?
Oh,
Because if
wow.
participate, I'll go to the future.
Yeah.
If observe, actually, no, if participate, I'd go to the past because I'd be like Biff in Back to the Future 2 with the sports almanac, right? I'm like,
Yes.
listen, I know who's going to win the Super Bowl, NBA championship. You're never going to see it coming. Jake, you're set. Grandkids, great grandkids, here we go. Um, No, I actually would be very interested in going back to a couple of different points in history. I would be fascinated about the early days of the US and sitting in
Mm,
some of the rooms of the debates on just the founding fathers.
yeah.
And because we have this like very glitz and pretty image of it. And I just feel like it was a messy process. And I would love
Right.
to see how they handled and navigated that process. Um, that would be one. I would be very interested even going back way longer than that of just different armies and generals and like it was a whole different world then but like
Yeah.
which guys actually led with pure fear and which ones actually motivated?
I like
and
that.
inspired, because you read all this stuff about like ancient Sparta
Mhm,
and the Spartan warriors, and it's nothing like what most people think about, of how
mhm.
they built their culture. So yeah, past always fascinates me. I'm a history guy. Um, and I just think like, yeah, it was a whole harder world. So if I'm living there, I'd go in the future because it's only going to
Okay.
get better from a lot of senses. But the past,
Yes.
I would go back and observe.
That's really I love that insight because you think about and you said it, it's was messy during our founding fathers' time, like, the glitz that we attach to that and the things that we put on that in terms of, "This is what that is, this is what that means." Oh, how do we know? Yeah, I think that's a really great, a great idea. Yeah, observing that messy start because I mean, it had to start somewhere.
Yep.
There you go. I one more question and I'll let you go for the day. Last one's a little bit deeper than those surface ones we've just had. What motivates you the most?
Honestly, it's the people I have a chance to impact. Like the
Yeah.
ones who share stories with me, encourage me as a reminder to keep going. And the people I've never met or interacted with are kind of the motivations to keep showing up.
Mhm. That's great. Yeah. That fuels you. Yeah. And in an
Definitely
effort
does.
well, in an effort, it fuels all of us too. If we can just springboard on that and be present for those people and be present for our own process too. Stay in that present and really be a witness to those around us that we know that we can contribute to, and then be that best person that we can be. Be the
Yep.
best potential. Dig it out and go for it. Man, Jake, it's been great. I'm so, so, so
Yeah.
excited to have had the talk.
Thanks so much for having me on today. This was fun.
Absolutely, absolutely. What do you have planned for the rest of your day? Anything fun?
No, I have calls the rest of this afternoon, a little
Okay.
bit of writing, and then definitely plan to watch my Dallas Mavericks play in the playoffs tonight. So I will watch on
Oh,
TV the playoff game too. So that is my exciting Tuesday. A little more work, a little more calls, and then a little bit of basketball.
well, it sounds like you have a great finish to the rest of your day for sure.
Uh,
So,
we'll see. We'll
man,
see if we can get that win. I will.
there you go. There you go. Good luck on that one. And
Thank you much.
forever. Horn frogs forever. Yeah. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Jake.